All right, today I'm going to give you a little introduction to the documentary we're going to watch about the band. If you don't know the band, they were made famous by playing with Bob Dylan, and they were called Bob Dylan and the Band. And when they went away from Bob Dylan, they were just the band. But I'd like to give you a little context before you get started. The band is one of my favorite groups of all time, forever and always, and I'll tell you a little bit why. So in the early 60s, they started as the Hawks. So this was back in the day when there were dance band circuits. So you'd go play at a bar or a hotel for like a week, and then you would go to the next bar or hotel. And they played in Canada. And it was three Canadians. It was Richard Manuel, who played piano and sang, Robbie Robertson, who's the guitar player, who also sings a little bit, and then Rick Danko, who is the bass player and sings a lot as well. Plus Levon Helm. Levon Helm, if you don't know, is my favorite musician of all time. He's a drummer, he's a singer, he also plays guitar and mandolin. I love Levon, love the way he drums. It's so simple and clean and perfect and serves the song. It's never flashy, but he's also has great creative grooves. Then he sings so well. Anyway, so it's these three Canadians plus one American, Levon, plus this guy Ronnie Hawks, who runs the band, who's like a big showman. Now they tour pretty much year round for like 5 years, and during this time they're playing blues and country and R&B and early rock and roll. And there's not a lot of bands doing it. So they're getting tons of work and tons of experience just being this touring, awesome early rock and roll band. Then Bob Dylan finds them, and he takes them on tour. They do a couple albums, and then they break away from Bob Dylan and just become the band. They end up living in this house called Big Pink in outside of Woodstock, New York. And they live in this house together, and they're just writing and recording because they're on stipend from Bob Dylan. So Bob Dylan's paying them to be his backing band. And while he's not there, they're writing and recording their own songs. So they put out this album called Music from Big Pink. Here's the big hit from Music from Big Pink. You might know this, called The Wait. Here's the little chunk.
Take a load off, Fanny. Take a load for free. Take a load off, Fanny. And you put the load right on me.
So you might know that song. That's from their previous album. Then they put out this album just self-titled called The Band. It's a Brown album. That's what we're going to learn about today. It's all brown. The Band is awesome. This album's fantastic. What I love about it is it's folk, it's rock and roll, it's funky, it's R&B. They all sing. There's not like a real lead singer. Like Levon sings, Richard sings, Rick Danko sings, and I think and Garth sings harmony. They all play a bunch of different instruments. So they all play different horns and guitar and bass and piano and keys, and it's just they're just very good, and they wrote really beautiful music. And at the time, they were doing music that nobody else was doing. So let's look at that context for a second. So to give you a little more context, during the late 60s, when the band came about, their first album was 68, 69, and this is 69, 70 when the Brown album came out. At the time, what was popular was the Beatles, and especially like psychedelic era Beatles, where they were wearing kind of weird costumes. Songs were getting either longer and more complicated and weirder with lots more instruments, or they were stripped down and folky. And then other groups like Hendrix, which was real straight up rock and roll. What made the Beatles different, what made the band different was that it was kind of unclassifiable. It wasn't dirty Stones rock. It wasn't like that bluesy, dirty, gritty rock. It was too articulate and clean for that. But it wasn't British, Beatles, pop rock or art rock, and it wasn't Led Zeppelin hard rock. It was its own American thing that was this combination of country and rock and roll, and by rock and roll I mean like early rock and roll, like Stax Records or like Little Richard, like bluesy, more R&B influenced rock and roll, and then kind of some like funk and folk elements. So this weird combo that was different than anything else that had been put out. Plus, they were not into being fashionable. Their faces weren't really on the albums. It was just one picture of the band. The first album Didn't have any pictures of the band individually. They didn't wear crazy outfits. They weren't about a weird stage show. They just were a little different. So anyways, I love this record. There's some soft songs. There's some heavier songs. There's some funky songs. It can fit just about any mood. So hopefully you enjoy this. I hope that you do. Here we go.